Here are my flashcards. Hi, my name's Javen Finneman, and today I'll be talking to you about physician-assisted suicide. Have you ever thought about how you're gonna die? There's many different ways that you can die in this world. You could go out and get hit by a car, or you could just die naturally in your sleep of natural causes. Now, if you had the choice between being terminally ill and suffering until you can't possibly take it anymore and you pass away, or taking a medication to let you go on your own and have the own decision to pass away yourself, which one would you choose? Now, from 1998 to 1997, on euthanasia.procon.org, under state-by-state physician-assisted suicide statistics, you can find the statistics of the United States currently. The number of prescriptions written since 1998 to 2017 was 4,249, and the percent of those used was only 66.3%. Now, the number of deaths was 2,814, the yearly average was 548.7, and the total was 3,703% out of that 4,249. Now, the number that were female was 49.3%, and the number that was male was 50.7%. Out of all of those percentages, the percent that was white was 94.2%, and the race that was other for these was 5.8%. Now, out of all that, the total that were college educated was 47.7%, and the percent that had cancer was 63.1% out of all of those people that had passed, out of that 66.3. Now, this is only legal in 5 states, which is Oregon, New Mexico, Vermont, Montana, and Washington, which means that in New York it is considered a crime for euthanasia. Now, I don't know if anybody else has seen anybody that was terminally ill, but I personally have seen a couple of friends that have had family members pass from this. One of my closest friends' stepfather was actually sick with esophageal cancer. He had gone to get an esophagus transplant when they had found more lesions throughout his body, and it turns out that the cancer had spread, so there was nothing more that they could do for him other than trying chemotherapy again, which was already not working, which is why they were doing the esophageal transplant. And he ended up being on all sorts of medications that caused complications, and instead of having the choice to possibly take a medication and to go on his own free will, he and his family had to suffer emotionally, and he had to suffer physically, while the medications caused holes in his lungs, which allowed his lungs to fill up with fluid, and he in turn ended up drowning to death on his own body fluids. Now, according to Gale 1 file, Legalizing Physician-Assisted Suicide, Some of the Thoughts and Concerns by Harold G. Koenig, most physicians have had patients with advanced cancer, end-stage heart failure, severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or other disabling and painful diseases. Many of these persons experience great physical and emotional suffering during their final few weeks or months of their lives. Later in that paragraph, it also states that in the Netherlands, more than 85% of euthanasia cases occur in medically ill persons and aged 50 years or over, and most are performed by general practitioners, which means that basically they could go to their own general doctors and have their request submitted and be able to do that on their own free will if they're lining up with their requirements for it. Now in New York, you can't go and do that, so you don't have the choice for it at all, and it's either fight as hard as you can or just let the illness take over and let you go. Now, according to Abisco Host Academic Search Complete, Physician-Assisted Suicide, Removing Residency Requirements in the U.S. to Comport with International Right to Health by Alexei Silverman, he stated, to obtain physician-assisted suicide under the Death with Dignity Act, a patient must be compatible to make an informed decision at least 18 years of age, possessing an incurable disease, that will lead to death within 6 months and has to be an Oregon resident. So this is for Oregon specifically. I'm not sure if this goes for all of the states in the US or what the requirements are for anything out of the country. But he also states, in addition, the patient must make a voluntary written and oral request for the lethal medication. Oregon imposes a minimum of 15-day waiting period between requests and 48 hours before you are able to receive the medications on your own. Now, with this said, the way that this happens is you request once orally to your doctor, and then you have to wait another 15 days and also request again orally, but you also have to have a written request of what you want done, which is basically saying, I so-and-so would like to die by this, and that allows you to go ahead with the thing. Now, you also have to wait 48 hours after your last request before picking up the medication. This amount of time gives you enough time to reflect on your decision and to make sure that this is a choice that you're making for yourself and that this is definitely what you want to do and you're no longer willing to fight for this. And you only have 6 months left. So if that's your choice, if you decided to fight, if you decided to be assisted into suicide, that is something that you're able to think about in those days. Now, according to Galen Context, Opposing Viewpoints online collection, an article named Assisted Suicide Disregards All Medical Ethics by Jasser. If the goal of PAS is to stop unnecessary suffering, then why are Alzheimer's patients and their families forced to suffer for years with no recourse, while people with a shorter terminal disease that don't impair their thinking have the right to choose their own fates? Later in that paragraph, it also states, because of their mental capacity, they don't have the right to choose. Now, this is actually an excellent point that goes a little bit against the euthanization that they have open for people right now. Now, with Alzheimer's patients, they lose the capacity to be able to think for themselves, and they continue to diminish in their mind, so they are basically going insane. They don't know what's going on. Usually they have to be moved into assisted facilities to be able to help take care of them, because it is a full-time job taking care of an Alzheimer's patient. And there's also, they can't sit there and make a sound decision because of how diminished their brain capacity is. They're not lucid very much, and even when they are, when would you have the time for the 15-day period or the 48 hours after that to be able to get the consent from the patient, and how often would they actually be lucid enough for you to be able to do that with them? Now, I understand that the families that are going through this are suffering, but I believe that if something like that was to be taken into consideration for this type of deal, going on with physician-assisted suicide, first, I feel like if it should be open in more states if you're going to go ahead with Alzheimer's being added to it. And if Alzheimer's is added to it, I feel like when you're going in through the onset of it, which when you have Alzheimer's, it doesn't just slap you all at once. You have an onset of it, and it continues to progress as you grow and as your brain functions. Now, if you were to choose this, there's a possibility that you could put it in your will or put it down on paper and have to go through that when you are deciding what you want to do when you are passing. Kind of like how you can leave your stuff to everybody. If you had the option to be able to put it in your will and say, if I was to be terminally ill and there's no possibility of me returning, or my brain capacity hit this point, I would like to die by physician-assisted suicide, and that might be able to solve some of the problems that they have with Alzheimer's patients not having the capacity to do it themselves, because then you would have them in their sound mind beforehand, and then you would be able to look at them now and say that they made this decision soundly, in a sound state of mind, and they knew what they wanted, and now that they can have it. Kind of like how people can sign for intubation through their wills. If you wanted to be only intubated for, let's say, 30 days before you'd like to be removed, you can also put that down in your will and have that as an option for the people that are directing your medical attention. Now, that concludes my speech on physician-assisted suicide. We talked about the statistics. So far since 1998 to 2017, there's only been 4,249 patients that have requested the prescription, and only 66.3% of that actually took the medication and used it, and 63.1% of that 66 were cancer patients, which were terminally ill, and they weren't going to be able to get any better. And the Netherlands has a higher population for euthanization. They have less rules for it. Like in New York, you can't do it, or it's considered a crime. And you must be absolutely capable of making sound decisions when you're making this. So you can't just make it on a whim. You can't turn around one day and say that I want to die. And then you can also we also looked at the argument that stated that Alzheimer's should be concluded into this group of people, and that they should have the option for doing this. Now that concludes my whole speech. Thank you for watching. Bye.